Hey everybody, it's Mr. Forrest here. I'm going to do a short little recording here for downloading 7-zip or using 7-zip to extract a zip file onto a local USB stick. So this way it'll kind of mimic your floppy drive A in the book. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Go. Bingo. Okay, so in your course modules, okay, over here, if you come down to week 2, there you go, right in here. Right here, it says create a student activity using a blank. That's where this video is going to be stored. I have an older one in there right now and stuff, but that's where that one's going to be. If you're using WinZip, that's fine, except WinZip's going to overall all the date and timestamps of the original file creations, and therefore it's not going to match the book exactly. You'll just have to kind of guess on certain questions for the homework, but again, I'm not going to sweat the 1 or 2 questions that aren't able to select it. But if you use 7-zip, it'll keep the original file date and time stamp for files. Folders are different, but files will have the same one. So here's the link to the 7-zip, right? So if you go into that link for 7-zip, this opens in a new window. Let me reshare the screen. Here, I just want to make sure that you guys can see it okay. There you go. And this is for Windows. Again, I think you could even work on Windows XP, whatever. But, if you're a Mac person, again, you may find that WinZip or StuffIt or whatever, we're just looking to hopefully have things unzipped and using the file, original file, date and timestamps if possible. Okay, so that's a download 64-bit version right here. Okay, now what I've also done is I have gone through, and let me come back here. So close that part and come back to my module. Let me reshare my screen, make sure you can see it. There we go. Come down here to week 2 where I said, okay, list the student data zip, right? So I'm going to do this and I'm going to say, hey, I want to download this. Okay, so student data zip file up here, it's actually downloading. This is the 2nd time or 3rd time I've done it, so it's got a number 2. If I go in and I look at my file manager, here we go, come down here in my downloads folder, and I should see that screen. Again, let me reshare the screen so make sure you can see it. Sometimes Zoom doesn't do it. There you go. Here it is. I got it a couple of times, whatever. It has today's date and timestamp of just a minute ago. Okay, so that's the file I'm going to extract using 7-zip. And then what I'll do is that I will launch 7-zip. So here's the 7-zip here, and then it's going to say like, okay, where is this at? Okay, and right now I'm in the downloads folder of Drive C. If you're not sure, then it's C:\users /username. That's typically where most locations, because I just used the default, it's in the downloads folder. And then I'll find this, here it is. Here's the 7 student data zip a few moments ago. So I would select that and then tell it I want to extract. Now I need to tell it where my USB stick is. So I just plugged in a USB stick and my USB stick is drive I. So I'm going to put I:\, and I don't want it at any path. So I want to make sure that there's no paths inside there and stuff. So it's a default. So it's the root directory of drive I, and that's just where my USB stick is named into it. Okay, so I can click on OK. Now it's going to go through and process that. Yeah, that's okay. Let it go ahead and do the rest of it. No problem. Now at this point, I can close out 7-zip, and I'm going to open up my File Explorer, and down here I created a folder or a label called CIT40 data. And again, let me reshare the screen so you can actually see that. There we go. So here's my drive I. Okay, and then here's all the file and folders, and it's all original because look at those 2001, 98s and stuff like that, and that'll match up with the book a lot better. So at that point, then what happens is that when the book says, hey, put in your floppy disk and it's drive A, you're going to put in this USB stick, which is my data stick or whatever, stuff like that, and it's going to be drive whatever letter your USB stick gets assigned as the next USB port that's being used. Okay, and then that would be, so drive for me, my computer, drive I:\/ would be the same thing as A:\/ pretty much to find files and folders based upon the student data. So starting in chapter 2 all the way through chapter 10, you're going to have, in addition, in the study guides, you're going to have a section at the end that kind of mirrors your physical or your actual textbook. At the end of the textbook, they have what are called problem set 1 assignments. They're all pretty much multiple choice questions. They ask you to do a task and then try to answer multiple choices. So what I did is I typed up the actual questions and put it in the study guides, but I didn't type up the directions. So you want to follow the directions and stuff that are at the end of the chapter, do the tests that are described, and then from that you should be able to derive an answer for the various multiple choice questions for that study guide. Okay, so it's going to require you to sometimes use that data disk and follow those instructions. Okay, anyway, so I hope this kind of helps. It gives you kind of a little bit more of an insight as to what's going on. Again, if you used WinZip, then all those date and timestamps wouldn't go back to 2001. It would have today's date on it and today's timestamp on it. Again, the files are there. They're just dummy files to experiment with. But for those questions that'll say, hey, what's the date and timestamp for this file called dances? Well, answer might be answer C, December 11th, 1999. Okay. Well, if it's been overwritten with today's date, your answer is always going to be today's date, which is not going to show up probably as one of your answer alternatives. Okay. Again, I'm not going to sweat the small stuff on exact questions. Your grade is not going to hinge on one or two answers to a questions on any of the homeworks. Give it your best shot and stuff, and then kind of understand why those timestamps and stuff are a little bit different. Again, if you use 7-zip, it's kind of familiar with it. I don't know if StuffIt or whatever, or the other tools and stuff will do that, but I know that WinZip started changing that just recently, and so 7-zip has been the one I was recommending. Anyway, hope this helps. I'll end it there. You guys have a great one. Bye. Let me stop my share, and I'll stop my recording, and have a great day, okay?